All right, y'all, welcome to the show. We are playing catch up today. We have a zillion things to get to. Big news, big news. So, Vice, the world famous media empire at one point, is now dunsies, which is wild to think about, man. That's insane to think about. So, we're going to dive into that. We also have the thing I've been avoiding talking about, but I will now talk about, which is there are articles talking about Biden's sex life, bro. People are talking about Biden's sex life. All right. I don't want to do it, but we're going to go ahead and do it. And then later on in the show, we have John Fetterman somehow hitting new lows, just incredible depths that ogre is getting to. Later on in the show, Republicans are panicking over that Alabama Supreme Court decision, which is effectively like banning IVF. There's a civil war over that. All right, so we'll talk about that. And then later on, we also have Dean Phillips humiliating himself. And you had MSNBC go and talk to Michigan voters who are voting uncommitted in the primary. And it's really interesting because, man, look, you can't say they're unthoughtful. These people who are doing that have thought this through. They have a very clear position, and they lay it out there for you to either agree or disagree with. So we'll get to that as well. Everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps us out tremendously. We're trying to get to 10 million subs, and we are quite a bit away from that. So hook a brother up with that. All right, let's go ahead and dive into it here. So, guys, this is huge news that came out a few days ago. Vice, the media empire, is now donezo. They're done. So Vice CEO Bruce Dixon says the company will lay off hundreds of employees and stop publishing on the Vice.com website. I read one thing that said 900 employees. I didn't even know they had that many employees. I didn't even know that. But one thing I read said 900 employees. So I'll give you some of this here. Dear Vice team, as we navigate the ever-evolving business landscape, we need to adapt and best align our strategies to be more competitive in the long term. After careful consideration and discussion with the board, we have decided to make some fundamental changes to our strategic vision at Vice. We create and produce outstanding original content true to the Vice brand. However, it is no longer cost-effective for us to distribute our digital content the way we have done previously. Moving forward, we will look to partner with established media companies to distribute our digital content, including news, on their global platforms as we fully transition to a studio model. As part of this shift, we will no longer publish content on Vice.com, instead putting more emphasis on our social channels as we accelerate our discussions with partners to take our content to where it will be viewed most broadly. Look, the problem for them is they massively overexpanded and they weren't profitable. It's a tale as old as time in the business world, definitely in the media landscape with new media. They overexpanded and they were not profitable. And guys, this is like the fall of an empire. And I'm sure people who are in my audience, most of you are probably around the age where you're familiar to one extent or another with how much of a powerhouse Vice became in the 2010s. But just to show you, like, this is the sort of stuff they would release on a regular basis. So this is just one example. Vice News did what it's really like to fight for the Islamic State. They would embed on the ground with ISIS and record the life of an ISIS fighter, or they would go to Liberia and go to the slums over there and show what it's like to live in that scenario. They would embed with like the Bashar al-Assad government and show you what the Syrian civil war is like. Like, you would get these incredible... I mean, they talk to, like, cannibal warlords. I mean, this stuff that they did was out of this world. It's like they took the idea of a news outlet being on the ground in, like, the heat of a battle or something, and they took that all the way to its logical conclusion and to its extreme endpoint, where I don't even know... I mean, I'm sure there were massive insurance costs which ended up happening in these scenarios, because at any given moment, one of your reporters can die because they're in a hot war zone. I mean, it is that. I mean, they also had that very famous thing. Remember when they did a report on that new way to go after cancer, to like kind of cure cancer, where I forgot what it was. They took some other illness or disease and they would give people that illness, and that it would eat the cancer. And there were a few instances where actually it worked. And so this was a huge deal. And Vice broke the news of there's a potential cure for cancer out there. So let's just watch some of this, what it's really like to fight for ISIS. This is the sort of stuff that they put out there. So these are literal ISIS fighters. Another thing that they did is they did a ride-along with the ISIS Islamic morality police when they would go around and say, hey, put on your veil if you're a woman. This guy stole something, so we're going to discuss whether or not to chop off his hand. This is the insane stuff they did. We don't need to watch too much more. I mean, you guys can go watch this on your own. But people couldn't look away from this. How are you gonna turn away from stories like this? 46 million views this video got. So now I'm gonna click on Vice News. I don't know what they've been doing recently. Was North Korea behind Sony cyber attack? 398,000 views 6 days ago. Why are indigenous women disappearing in Canada? 289,000 views 9 days ago. Behind the hacks, the origins of Anonymous. 1 million views 12 days ago. Married at 14, Zambia's child brides. 1 million views 2 weeks ago. So look, to my surprise, they actually are still kind of doing a lot of the stuff that they used to do. Saving South India's below sea level farms. That was only 85,000 views 3 weeks ago. That's not great for them. The women of FARC, inside America's longest war. 432,000 views. The scientists creating the foods of the future. 60,000 views 4 weeks ago. I don't know. This is Vice News. Let's look at the original Vice channel. I don't know if they haven't... Have they been posting over there still? It looks like they have. Videos. So we got, before OnlyFans, there were cam girls. 44,000 views 4 days ago. How Stefan Janowski became the world's most successful skater. 455,000 views 8 days ago. Dying without regrets, according to a death doula. I'm not sure what that is. Can weed lead to a reduction in NFL concussions? 94,000 views. These masked strippers are ATL's new heroes. I mean, look, when I saw Vice was going under, my first thought was they had to stray from that original mission, right? That original mission of let's just go into the craziest situations possible, record it, and then show everybody, and people will not be able to look away. To be fair, it looks like they're still doing it. But I mean, I think the problem, particularly when you're dealing with these newer media companies, is that a lot of them, they wanted to be like the next CNN. So in the process of doing that, you massively overexpand, you take on way too much debt, and if you don't have a way of monetizing the content, right, then eventually you're going to go belly up. It's just basic economics. And I guess they didn't have a way to monetize this in a way where, they could take care of all the things that go hand in hand with running a company, paying for all the employees, paying for whatever the hell else they needed to pay for. I don't know how many different headquarters they had for Vice, for example. But it's wild that they're gone now. I mean, look, to avoid the situation that they're in, I do think I'm like a traditionalist on these things. My take is always, especially if you're in new territory, right, you should probably definitely never overexpand. Always keep everything close to the chest. Be in control of your decision-making process. To the extent you take a risk, it should only be moderate risk. If they never overexpanded, it's almost like they got too big for their own good. They had that deal with HBO for a while where their stuff would run on HBO. But for them to go under, Jesus Christ, it's so crazy to wrap your mind around that. And to ditch the brand, the Vice brand, that almost feels like there's no way that's... I want to watch this one later. The downfall of WWE's Vince McMahon. 991,000 views from a month ago. We all know the scandal he's been involved in recently. So, it looks like they stuck to the original mission, at least to one extent or another. I guess the problem was the overexpansion. Now, the other issue is, of course, they got a little bit of a reputation for, at least certainly for their written content, but also for their videos to one extent or another. They got a little goofy from time to time. So here, let me show you this. Look, to be fair, I don't know if all these headlines are real, right? But they were known for stuff like this. Let's say that. So here, I'll read this for you because how I rediscovered sexual liberation through fisting. The communist sex workers doing financial domination for praxis. The meth-fueled week-long orgies ravaging London's gay sex party scene. The far right are uniting around their right to, quote, free speech. Fatphobia exists, and it's especially bad in the bedroom. How to eat out a non-op trans woman. We talked to a professional cuck about the alt-right. A professional cuck? Most child sex abusers are not pedophiles, expert says. You absolutely can be fat and fit. Breaking news, you can't be both fat and fit. What it's like to be an asexual sex worker. Why can't my famous gender nonconforming friends get laid? So they really, at times, they really leaned into the we're super woke and we're gonna go deep into this world and do headlines like sex tourism isn't just for straight white guys anymore, right? Like what are we doing here? What are we doing here? U.S. Customs wants Indians to stop carrying cow dung in their luggage. Again, how to have sex with a fat girl? Like what are we doing? What are we doing? For real, what are we doing here? Now, again, to be fair, I don't know if all these headlines are real, but I know I've seen enough in real life from Vice where it's like, damn, bro, you guys are wilding over there. This isn't exactly content that's going to attract a massive audience. It's almost like very fringe and bizarre and just strange. It's just strange. So they do have a little bit of a reputation for that goofiness, along with the stuff I was saying before, which is like, just balls of steel going into a war zone, going on the ground to where there's a famine, exposing the dark underworld of drug cartels or whatever it might be. I mean, they've gone deep on it. So I'm actually kind of sad to see it go. But again, tale as old as time. I think the problem for them, apparently they didn't know how to monetize everything in a way where they could consistently keep the size of the project they were doing. That's a problem. And, the core of it is, I think Gavin McGinnis was one of the founders and Shane something else. I'm blanking on the other dude's name. But, they should have never let it get as out of hand as it did, where it became too big for its own good and it expanded too much. I mean, I think that's the bottom line, right? And by the way, my heart goes out to all these people who work there and now got laid off and now have to find new jobs. Like, I feel genuinely, genuinely bad for them. So my issue is not with them as individuals. My issue is more with almost that mindset of like, we want to be the king. We want to be the empire. We want to be the CNN of new media, if you will. I've seen that ideology and that mindset ruin a bunch of products that were otherwise phenomenal. And you didn't need to be the CNN of new media. You needed to be Vice. You need to be yourself, right? Like, and that's where they lose their way. Overexpand, don't get enough revenue. And look, the other thing is, you guys know I'm a big advocate of this, is, if you keep the operation a reasonable size, all you need to do is to crowdfund and do small dollar donations, right? Look, you just can't fund an operation this big, as big as it was, I should say, with small dollar donations, because you're never going to get enough to pay for 900 workers or whatever the hell they had, right? But if you kept it small and close to the chest and then did crowdfunding through small dollar donations, you definitely can succeed and can keep putting out high quality work. And also, you're not subject to the whims and the pressures of various corporations and advertisers and upper management in that scenario, because there is no upper management. You are upper management. So I think, again, this is where a lot of new media companies get lost, is they get too big for their own good. They have too many revenue streams that eventually dry up, right? And you kind of neglect the main source of what should be your popularity, which is your own audience. So if you keep the operation reasonable in size and you crowdfund and you do small dollar donations, I mean, you guys know, we learned that lesson the hard way during Adpocalypse, when all the money was cut off like that for political YouTubers, and it lasted for 2 weeks or whatever it was, and it was a panic. And I think all of us realized at that point, all of us in new media, certainly on YouTube at the time, is like, oh, we cannot trust any of these systems and YouTube and we can't rely on any other company to like come through in the clutch. And so you got to try to get as close to your audience as possible in the sense that, hey, we fund this through Patreon, you know, or we fund this through tips on YouTube, which is the thanks button below. That's the only way to have a direct connection with your audience, never lose sight of your mission, and keep your operation a reasonable size. That's the only way to continue to guarantee quality work gets put out. And with Vice, again, tale as old as time, they got too big for their own good. They hired too many people. Maybe to some extent, they may have lost some sense of the original mission. And all the various revenue streams and the big money players sort of dried up. And so here we are. And it's a real shame. I mean, I wish Vice would continue to exist, but perhaps they downsize, perhaps they crowdfund, and they get back to the core of what they were really good at, right? Certainly in the era where they blew up, which is like, we're going to show you some of the craziest shit in the world, and it's going to have news value, but it's also going to be entertainment. That was their thing. That was their thing, and this is like the death of a giant. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.